I'm Pastor Chris. Thanks for joining today for a Bible study. We pray that this time really is rich, that it's edifying. In John chapter 17, verse 17, Jesus said, "Sanctify them by your truth, your word is truth." And we really do believe that we're transformed and changed when we study the Word of God. And so we're just praying for you that this would be a sweet time. You know, if you're somebody who's maybe joining in from out of the area, we would encourage you to make sure that you're a part of a local church in the area that you live in. We really do believe it's important to gather with believers. Or maybe you're a part of the Grace Chapel family and temporarily, because of health concerns or issues, you have to kind of step away from the gathering. And we just would pray that when you're able and ready, you would be able to join us again. In the meantime, if we can ever serve you in any way, please email us at live@gclancaster.com. We are here for you, and we love you. Well, I pray that you're blessed today as you study God's Word.
I read a story this week, and it's a short little thing. I think Doug will like it because you're ex-Leo here. And this was a little story about a group of young police recruits who were learning leadership. They were in a little leadership seminar, and the instructor that was there, he called one of the men forward in the class and handed him a piece of paper and was essentially going to test his leadership. And on the piece of paper it said, "You are in charge. Get everyone out of the room without causing a panic." Right? Well, this young man did not have good leadership skills. He was at a loss for words and returned to his seat not knowing what to do. A second man was summoned, and he got up and went up there to the front, and he got his assignment, and he said, "Everybody outside, go." And everybody did exactly what you're doing right now. Nobody moved. And then a third man glanced at the instructions, smiled, and said, "All right, men, let's break for lunch." And everybody left the room, right? Fun little story there. Really, the story is about leadership and about setting people in motion to accomplish a task and doing it effectively, doing it concisely, doing it in a way that is not by manipulation, but as a leader, right? And so I think that little story helps us understand really where we're going today. I've titled our sermon, "Strengthening Feeble Hands." And that is what Nehemiah does in our passage today. He strengthens the hands of the Israelites as they have been reluctant to accomplish this task which has been set before them by God to rebuild Jerusalem. And we know by our really background from last week that the walls of Jerusalem still lied in ruins, and the people were living in this condition for 100 years, and nothing had been done. And their hands needed to be strengthened, and Nehemiah was the man for the job, and Nehemiah really puts on display great leadership in doing this. And one of the things that we'll see, really the key focus there, if you look on your page, was that Nehemiah was not simply a great leader. But what made him a great leader was the fact that he had the right focus and the right approach. Amen. He was able to set people in motion like others hadn't before. It says, furthermore, Nehemiah recognized that anything that he could accomplish was not dependent on his own skill in administration, but God's strengthening and sustaining hand. And that is something that we're going to see time and time again as we look at our passage today. That summarizes what Nehemiah does in this passage. I won't read it since Lee already read it for us. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you doing that. But I do have a quote here that's interesting about leadership that I do want to turn your attention to. This quote is by George Barna. And he said, "Leadership is the ability to put the plans into practice and to accomplish the specified objectives through the skillful management of people, time, and tangible resources. A good leader is one who is able to motivate people, one who is capable of making good decisions, even under pressure or in conditions of uncertainty. One who can guide people through actions as well as through words." And Nehemiah did that. He guided the nation of Israel not just by his own words, but also by his actions as he was right there alongside with them doing the work himself. And so that's kind of what we're going to see today. We're going to see some of the things about Nehemiah's leadership, his leadership style, the things that made him effective, and how he motivated the people of Israel to action to accomplish this task in building the walls. Right? He's the guy who was able to see the problem and go, okay, here's what we need to do. We need to release them for lunch, and then they'll get out the room, right? He knew what they needed to accomplish the job, and that's what he did. So let's just pray, and then we'll get into the passage. Lord, we just ask that you would be with us today as you are guiding and directing our time. Soften our hearts to hear your word. Let there be any bit of application that needs to be applied to our life, willingly accepted, Lord. And we thank you for just the brothers in this room and the opportunity to be here, Lord. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen. Well, the first thing I want to turn your attention to is Nehemiah's arrival. The first part of our passage really describes Nehemiah's arrival into Jerusalem. You guys remember that he was previously stationed in Susa, which was the capital city of Persia at this time. It's about an hour and a half in that time, well, about 90 miles driving distance, north of the Persian Gulf. And so this was actually east of the Tigris and Euphrates River. It was about 900 miles away from the city of Jerusalem. And Nehemiah had this calling, this sense of burden and desire, even urgency, to go to Jerusalem, the city of his ancestors, to rebuild the city. And you guys remember from last week that he went and he told the king, Artaxerxes, about this, that he had to go and rebuild the city. And Artaxerxes allowed him to do that because God's favor had been put upon Nehemiah. And so Nehemiah then decides, I'm going to go, and the king, Artaxerxes, actually gives him a convoy, and he gives him permission to go, and he sends him to Jerusalem, not just as a builder, but really Nehemiah is like a governor. He's going to serve as an administrator for the king as he makes his way into Jerusalem. And you really see the first part of his journey there in verse 9. Look with me. It says, "Then I came to the governors of the province beyond the river." What do you guys think that beyond the river means?
Past the river.
Okay, well, yeah, but what river? I know what beyond the river means. Yeah, the Tigris and the Euphrates, right? Remember exactly what I said. So he's got a long journey ahead of him. So you guys remember Ezra. Ezra lived about the same time as Nehemiah. He was a contemporary, but he made a journey to Jerusalem slightly before Nehemiah did. In Ezra chapter 7, it actually mentions that Ezra's journey took 4 months to complete, right? Now, Nehemiah actually had to travel a little further than Ezra. So we know he had a long journey ahead of him. But one of the things that the king did was he provided him with the resources for that journey. Right? Nehemiah was not alone in going through this journey. It says, "Then I came to the governors of the province beyond the river and gave them," notice this, "the king's letters. Now the king had sent with me officers of the army and horsemen." And so Nehemiah is on this journey, really not just to rebuild, but as an administrator, as I mentioned, for the nation of Persia. He would become a governor of sorts for Jerusalem. But there's a couple things to note here. He has the king's letters, and he also has a convoy with him. So in other words, he has protection and permission. Now, why is this important? Protection and permission in the way that he journeyed to Jerusalem.
With the angels.
I don't see where you're going with that, but that's okay. Anybody else? Enemy lines, dangerous. Do you guys ever drive up the 395? That's like my favorite road in the whole world. But do you guys know Robber's Roost? All right. Tell me, what do you know about Robber's Roost? Okay, there you go. Does anybody know the story behind Robber's Roost? Well, it has its name for a reason, because when stagecoaches back in the day would travel down that valley, it was a place where the robbers would hang out and go and then rob the stagecoaches and kill the people on their way that were on their way down to like LA and so it was this robber's roost. That's how it got its name. And you, as you're driving up the 395, just before you hit kind of like the turn off to Ridgecrest, you'll see the big rock on the left-hand side there, the west side of the road, where they used to hide out at, the bandits used to hide out at. So that is why Robber's Roost got its name. And Nehemiah would have experienced the same types of things. As this was a time where they were traveling by foot, there would have been raiders along the road, and they had to protect themselves. And so he had a convoy of the army of the king with him and horsemen to protect him. But then also he had permission. He had permission to go and do what he was doing. All this to say, this is an official entourage of the king. This is not simply something small. He is a representative of the Persian Empire. And then you'll see something interesting when he arrives. Look at verse 10. But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite servant heard this, it displeased them greatly that someone had come to seek the welfare of the people of Israel. Well, Nehemiah has made his journey at this point and is arriving in Jerusalem. And he receives some opposition. And this is foreshadowing of more opposition that's going to come throughout the book. We're going to hear more about Sanballat and Tobiah. And they oppose the work of the Lord. It's really interesting because there's been ancient documents that have been found in regards to Sanballat. And he was actually the governor of Samaria at this time. So he's not an insignificant man. He has some power behind him. But also there's been known this historical fighting between Samaria and Jerusalem and God's people. And here Sanballat is standing against Nehemiah because Nehemiah wants to go and raise up Jerusalem. He wants to rebuild the city. And so Sanballat resists him. It says there that it displeased them greatly that someone had come to seek the welfare of the people of Israel. It kind of reminds me of what we see today, right? There are lots of people who do not want the welfare of the nation of Israel. And that is true as we look around the world. But it just reminds me that wherever God is working, there will be opposition to that work. That is a certainty. There is satanic opposition, and there is satanically inspired opposition. There's a difference between those things. Satanic opposition arises from Satan himself, and he is the one opposing as the adversary. Scripture speaks of him as the adversary. But then there is also satanically inspired opposition, where Satan will, or even the demons will cause, for instance, a Sanballat or a Tobiah to rise in their hearts and stand against the work of God. And that is what is happening here. There is a reality of an adversary who will seek to frustrate and thwart God's plans wherever they might come about. Whether this be by means of inward temptation, we can have opposition in our own lives when God is working in our own hearts that arises from inside of us to resist the things that God is doing. I think of even your testimony as you were a young man. Or there is outward persecution and opposition, and that is what is going on here. Sometimes even by God's people. Even God's people can oppose God's works. I think of the nation of Israel as they, before the time of the exile, really before Nehemiah, that they resisted God's works. They resisted the prophets. They closed their ears to hearing the truth of God that was being spoken against, really condemning them. Stephen, you guys remember Stephen, who was stoned to death in the early church? Well, what did he say about when he was condemning the nation of Israel? About their past and about their forefathers. He said, which of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? He called them stiff-necked, right? Stubborn in heart. And so there's this opposition that exists to the work of God wherever it is happening. And this is exactly what is going on here. As Nehemiah gets on the scene, and he hasn't even really started the work, and there's this opposition that's rising against him. I think of God's promise of deliverance. There's a passage in 1 Samuel chapter 2 that says, "The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Against them he will thunder in heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed." So while there is opposition, God promises to redeem and deliver out of that opposition because he is working, right? And I like what Nehemiah does here. Here's a note that you could not really just jot down, something that we could learn from Nehemiah. Notice Nehemiah's composure. Despite the opposition, he remains undaunted. He is not scared. He knows God's hand is upon him to accomplish a task, a difficult task, though one he is equipped to handle. And so this section describes Nehemiah's arrival onto the scene in Jerusalem. Well, let's look at the next thing, Nehemiah's survey. So when Nehemiah gets to Jerusalem, the first thing he does is he knows he has a task to accomplish. He knows he has to build something, but would it be foolish to just show up on the job site having never seen what you're actually looking at and just want to start building? You can't do that, right? You've got to have the plans, but you also have to survey the land. You have to pay great care in the prep work. You guys remember tearing into the horseshoe? You guys, maybe some of you saw the pictures of that or saw it in person. And we were ripping trees out and ripping concrete out and ripping playgrounds out. And it was crazy, right? Mounds of dirt and everything. It's just nuts. Well, before we got to the point where we could pour concrete in there, what did we have to do?
Pour forms.
Okay, so, but even before the forms.
We had to plan it.
Well, we had to plan it, but we had to tear everything out.
Tear it up.
We had to make sure our pipes, our irrigation were where we wanted them, right? That way we're not putting it underneath concrete that's inaccessible, okay? And we had to make sure our utilities are where we were so we weren't going to ruin anything, right, and cause more damage. Then we had to make sure it's perfectly graded, right, and flat. Then we get to the point to where we're making forms, and then we lay out concrete, and we start going from there. And then we do like all the finish irrigation for sprinklers and whatnot. And this is right. That's right. So it's a process, and we have to do it according to its proper order. Otherwise, you get in trouble. Well, Nehemiah is doing that. He arrives on the scene, and he can't go and say, he can't call in the cavalry and say, "Hey guys, come on, let's start rebuilding," without having ever seen the walls, without having ever seen the city. You remember, Nehemiah was not born in Jerusalem. He doesn't know the city, so he needs to go and assess the damage, if you will. And he's thorough. It says, so he went to Jerusalem and was there for 3 days. Then I arose in the night, and I and a few men, and told no one what my God had put into my heart to do for Jerusalem. There was no animal with me but the one on which I rode, and I went out by night by the valley gate, and he goes to all these different gates, and he's assessing the level of the damage. What are we supposed to learn from this? Well, number one, Nehemiah was systematic and he was thorough. He could not build unless he understood the extent of the damage and unless he could plan for and execute the repairs that needed to happen. So he would have had to calculate the time in which it would have taken to rebuild it. He would have had to calculate the labors needed to do that. And he would have also had to calculate the materials needed to finish the job. Amen. Right? He didn't want to be like one of those guys who started building a house and ran out of materials and money and he can't finish. He also, when he was going through this, would have had to triage the project. What do I mean by that?
Preparate.
Okay, no, not quite. Triage, right? What is the worst? What things do I need to focus on first? And maybe like prioritize. He also needs to go, okay, you guys are over here are really good like stonemasons, so I'm going to give you stonemasonry work. You guys are good blacksmiths, so I'm going to put you guys to work building the gates. And he had to do this with all the families that were living in Jerusalem and assign to them particular tasks that were suited for their skill set. So Nehemiah was thorough. And one of the things you also see is his findings. At one point it says in verse 14, "Then I went on to the fountain gate in the king's pool, but there was no room for the animal that was under me to pass." What does that mean?
The animal could not pass.
Exactly, right? It's very simple. The animal couldn't pass. Why couldn't the animal pass? Because the level of ruin and destruction was so bad that the animal couldn't walk through. It's supposed to evoke in our minds an image of Nehemiah crawling through rubble. That's the condition in which Jerusalem was in. Any of you guys a fan of World War II and study about that and read about that? Anybody? Have you guys ever seen the pictures of Dresden after the bombings from the Royal Air Force and the American Air Force? Right? The city was obliterated, right? It's a city in really kind of East Germany. It is destroyed. Right, exactly. When I picture, and the reason why my mind goes to Dresden though is a lot of the buildings were made of stone, right? And stone and brick, and so when you look at those pictures, it's rubble of stone and brick everywhere. That's a little what I picture the wall of Jerusalem looking like. And Nehemiah has to go and he has to crawl through that to see how bad it is. And it also mentions here that he told no one. Even in verse 16, "And the officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing, and I had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, and the rest who were to do the work." He was secret about the whole thing. Why do you guys think Nehemiah was secret about it?
He didn't want to be influenced by anybody else.
I think that's part of it, yeah. I think that's part of it too, right? He didn't know who he could trust, or, he didn't want to spill the beans on the plan before he even had a plan, right?
Right.
Or get everybody else's ideas.
Right? Isn't that so true?
Trust in the Lord Jesus.
It's a little dangerous when you've got a million planners, right? It's like Nehemiah's like, I need to go do this work myself, and we're gonna set a course forward. I think because an unplanned endeavor is destined to fail. And Nehemiah has to plan it out, otherwise it is going to fail. I think also because Nehemiah didn't yet know the extent of the problem. I think Nehemiah didn't want wrong information making its way out to the people. I think Nehemiah also wanted to keep his enemies in the dark as long as possible and thereby protect the plan from the outset. He didn't want it to be ruined before it even started. Because if he had told some people, you guys know how news spreads, it's like wildfire. And Sanballat would have heard out. He would have figured it out. And he would have discouraged the hearts of the Israelites before anything began. And they would have believed that it wasn't even possible to accomplish the task that Nehemiah was going to set before them. It does say, though, that he brought a few into his confidence. He arose at night, at verse 12, with a few men. In other words, he took a few trusted advisors and individuals along with himself. There's something important about a leadership aspect that we can draw out from this. First, that Nehemiah did not shoulder the burden himself. Do you notice that? Nor did, and I think this is important as well, nor did he allow the conclusions of Jerusalem's condition to be made by his own opinions alone. In other words, he's going to assess the damage, but he's not going to just simply rely on his own conclusions or knowledge, but he's going to take skilled people who are alongside of him, men that he could trust, who also know what they're looking at to confirm data. Like, let's check notes, right? If we're going to assess a problem, we're going to have a couple of us who are going to go and look at the problem first. It's like all of the work, and it's really funny that we're going through this rebuilding here on the campus because it kind of fits in with Nehemiah. It's like all of the work that was happening and is still happening at Desert Christian didn't happen out of the blue. We actually had meetings where we had men in the church who've got skill sets and backgrounds in building and constructing things, where we went and had multiple meetings walking the campus and getting ideas and figuring it out. And then once we had a plan, we announced it to the church, right? And kind of shared the vision of what we were doing, and then called on volunteers to come and help and execute that vision and make it possible. That's exactly what Nehemiah is doing here. He's exercising good leadership strategy. That's what Nehemiah is doing. And I think we could learn something too about Nehemiah in this, is his own willingness to sacrifice for the sake of the objective. He gets his hands dirty. He's willing to go and do the work. I think he's willing to work first, last, and hardest. I think that's one thing that makes for a good leader. The willingness to work first, last, and hardest. He's leading by example. Which is going to really bring us into our next section, Nehemiah's charge. I'm going to try to fly through this because I want you guys to have time on your tables. Nehemiah's charge. Then I said to them being the Israelites, so he's going to give them a charge, a challenge. You see the trouble we are in, how Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem that we may no longer suffer derision. Nehemiah here is taking responsibility and he's laying responsibility. He takes it upon himself, but he also lays it back upon the people. And he trusts the Lord to bring the success of the mission. The first thing he's doing is he's challenging them to see their deplorable condition. Open your eyes. Look around. That's what he's saying. He's saying, look at the condition in which Israel, Jerusalem, is lying in. It is in ruins with its gates burned. He challenges them to recognize the condition. It's an intervention of sorts, right? It's like David McCoy's mom calling him and saying, David, I love you, son, but what are you doing, right? That's exactly, sorry, I keep bringing this back, but that's what Nehemiah is doing to Israel. Isn't it so interesting that as humans, we could grow accustomed to our conditions? Man, in college, it is easy to have a dirty room, right? Because all your other roommates have a dirty room, and you got a dirty room, and you just stop taking care of real life stuff that, you've always relied on your mom to do, and it takes like 3 weeks before you do a load of laundry, and you just get used to living like that. And it's no wonder why none of us had girlfriends back then, right? It took me after college before I met my wife and started dating. But we grow accustomed to our conditions because we're adaptable as people, which can be good and bad. It's good because we're adaptable. It's bad because we can grow complacent. We can accept mediocrity. We can begin to accept the things that should be unacceptable. And that was the nation of Jerusalem, and Nehemiah has to call them out on that. He has to intervene. So that's what he does. And then he challenges them to do something about it, about rebuilding the walls. He says, come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem that we may no longer suffer derision. I love what Nehemiah does here. He identifies himself with the people. He doesn't say, come, you guys go build your wall of your city. Notice that? He doesn't say that. He says, come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem that we may no longer suffer derision. He identifies himself with the people, and this is one of the things that makes Nehemiah such a great leader. He sees the problems, he knows the solutions, but he's willing to walk alongside the people and be that solution with them. What do you think would have happened if Nehemiah fixed the problem himself and brought a whole bunch of soldiers from Persia to go and fix the problem?
It would explode.
Well, no, I don't think it would. Maybe like metaphorically.
They'd have no pride in it.
They'd have no pride in it. They would take no ownership of it. Are you really grateful for something you never had to work for? Do you ever really take care of something that was just given to you? Maybe you do. But I think Nehemiah knows that if the people of Israel do not take ownership over this and do not build together, there will be no pride in it. They will have never learned their lesson. They will never take care of it. So he charges the people. But then also at the same time, as if he said, you guys go rebuild your wall and I'm going to sit here and watch you, it never would have happened. So he has to tell them, take ownership. And guys, I'm right here with you and I'm going to build with you. He's essentially giving them the kick in the pants. Get going, start building. He's telling them, you have all the resources and the capabilities in your possession to fix this condition. Muster yourself up. I like how it says that in verse 18 there. So they strengthened their hands for the good work. That is to make a decision, to muster oneself up to accomplish a task that needs accomplishing. And Nehemiah was the catalyst that brought that about. He addresses their laziness, both spiritual and physical, and he calls them to strengthen their hands for the work. This is essentially, put your boots on, grab the trowel, let's get going, right? That's what Nehemiah does for these people. And I love of how he does it. There's a quote here. Peter Drucker says, leadership is not magnetic personality. That can just as well be a glib tongue. In other words, you could have a good tongue and be magnetic, but not a good leader. It's not making friends and influencing people. That is flattery. Leadership is lifting a person's vision to higher heights. The raising of personal performance to higher standards. The building of personality beyond its normal limitations. That's what Nehemiah did here. And then he also gave testimony of God's sustaining favor. Because he encouraged them and told them to remember, this is not going to happen by our own power, but by God's sustaining hand. When he was telling them, look at verse 18, about his coming to Jerusalem, he reassures them that God's hand was upon him for good, so that he might be able to come and have favor in the sight of the king to come and rebuild Jerusalem. So all of this that Nehemiah is charging them to do, he's going to say, you're going to go do it, but you're not going to do it by your own power. You're going to do it by God's sustaining power. It is God's power in his hand that sustains. He roots the future success of their effort in God's sustaining power alone. It's like Christ saying, I will build my church. I will build the walls of Jerusalem. We are vessels in God's kingdom to be used by him how he might choose. But we do not build the kingdom. He builds the kingdom. Exactly, right? And I also think, too, when God ensures the success, all the glory belongs to him, not to the workers. Amen. You know, there's an illustration. Herman Edwards, who was previously a coach of Kansas City Chiefs, I like what he says here. When it came to his thoughts on teamwork, he said, the players that play on this football team will play for the name on the side of the helmet and not the name on the back of the jersey.
Right on, brother.
And God's people must work not for our own name and our own glory, but for his, and by his power. and strengthening one another for the task at hand. Guys, I don't want to take more of your time. I want you to have time with your table group, so I'm going to leave it here. You have some questions there on the back of your sheet. Questions for contemplation. These are always just suggestions. If you take it where you guys want to go with it. But if you guys are stuck in a rock and a hard place and don't know what to talk about, there's some questions for you. But let's pray, and I pray that this was encouraging to you guys. Lord, we just ask that you would bless our time as we are sitting around these tables and cause us just to be encouraged by your word and be encouraged by Nehemiah and his leadership and how he encouraged the nation of Israel, Lord, to accomplish this task. We thank you for Ironman and for the ability to be here today, Lord. It's in your Son's name we pray.